Hey, this is Jeff Eckerly from the Kona team, and this is a recording to help you get better acquainted with Kona. The story really starts with this question, and this is why we built Kona. It's all around, we recognize we have this technology, email and SharePoint, all these things around us, but yet teams still struggle. And we really want to know why that is. And if you look at the communication of over the last 30 years, and the changes we've been through from telephone to fax machine to email coming on 20 years ago, and then the internet and texting and smartphones and now social media has come as a way for us to communicate in our personal lives. It's just that sharing information has become so much easier, but consuming it, organizing it, and acting upon it, that's what's challenging, especially when you're within a group or a project team that's united around a common purpose. So let's take a step back and think a little bit about how do you collaborate today in your groups. And a lot of us are using email, Excel spreadsheets for tasks, and these are things that were never really intended for group collaboration. In the era of social communication that we now are starting to get into. And we have SharePoint, and SharePoint is great for sharing files. And IT loves it because it gives them the control and you can customize it and you can do lots of things with SharePoint. But what do the users really say? Do users love it? Do users love it as a communication tool? And usually the answer is no. And then we have status meetings is another way that we collaborate. But too often I think we have ineffective meetings, or we have extra meetings, more meetings than we need, because we haven't found a way to keep track of everything while we're working through it. And so, these are really the reasons that we built Kona. Kona was built to provide really three different types of application all woven into one. We've got collaboration spaces for internal and external teams, a private social network to bring all your employees in the company together in a connected way, and then it's built for the individual who needs to be better at personal productivity. So when you think about your typical day at work, there's times when you're thinking about your stuff, which is the email coming at you and the tasks that you need to get done this day from your perspective. But you also are thinking in terms sometimes of the team or a group effort or a project, and that's really like the collaboration spaces. And then there's other times where the company is broadcasting information to you, or there's things with HR, or something with the 401k plan, or just some overarching company reason for you to be connected. And so with Kona, we've tried to really weave all of this into one application. And of course, Kona's mobile. In this day and age, you've got to be able to take your collaboration with you. So we have both an Android and an iOS app available that does just about everything that you can do on the website version of Kona. All right, so let's get to our story. And this story is about a company that Grace Cohen works for, who has embraced all the benefits of social business. Grace is a manager. She's got a team. She leads some projects. And Aiden Silverstein is a new employee that she's about to hire. So we're going to hear his experience of coming to work at a company that is a social business, and he's going to compare and contrast along the way to the previous experience he had at his previous employer that was more focused on email, SharePoint, and using task lists and Excel. And these images here are the spaces that we're going to work through, or the groups of people that Aiden's going to become a part of as we go. Okay, so let's jump into our story, starting here looking at a project space in Kona for Grace Cohen, who is the manager that I mentioned in our story. It's a week before Aiden is going to start, and she's in her space kind of looking around at this project and what the team's doing. And she's got all the people here, she's got some conversations going on, and really this is the place for the team to stay connected around this project, which is the Mirage Building Project. And as she's looking through some of the conversations, and doing some digging here, she's realizing that wow, the team's behind, and this is going to be a great project for Aiden to start on. So immediately she comes in here and she goes to the invite screen and she brings Aiden in, And as she does that, it's kind of reminding her, well, wait, that's right, Aiden's going to start in a week, so I need to get him all set up with an onboarding space. And what Kona allows Grace's company to do is to create uh, templates for we'll call repeatable type processes or projects. And what that does is, it gives the company a way to make sure there's consistency across how they do things. And these are some of the templates. She goes and selects the one called New Hire Onboarding. And when she does this, it's going to create a space for her and IT and HR and Aiden all to be in one place as they try to answer questions and help him figure out what he needs to do during the first few days that he's on the job. All right, so now it's day one, and Aiden walks in, and he's already kind of feeling more connected because of this onboarding plan, and he knows who a few people are. But another thing that Grace did was she invited him into her team of direct reports, and that makes sense to Aiden. He gets to see who he's working with. There's Grace's team, and he comes and starts looking at this space, and he's seeing some tasks. He sees some calendar events. But the one that catches his eye is this submit goals for Q3 and Q4 because he's a new employee and he's like, well, what is the team working on? What are we focused on? And he can go back and look at the conversation that different people made comments on around the goals. And this is really important because he can start to understand a little bit about who these people are. Maybe Julie is a star, and maybe here Lewis, who hasn't handed his goals in yet, is more of a slacker, and he can look here and see, well, who's entered their goals? Oh boy, I haven't completed mine yet. So he needs to figure out how to do that so that he can check that off and make sure that he's showing that he's complying with the rest of the team. He might also, again, trying to understand this new team he's a part of. What is he going to learn? What have they been doing in the past? Well, if we go in here and look at the past calendar, he might click on a team catch-up meeting that appears to be a weekly conversation that's happening with the team. And here, Grace posted a file about an important meeting they're having. Julie had some comments. Lewis talked. And again, we're able to start to get a feel for what the people on this team are doing and who does what. And he thinks back to his previous team and our previous work place and how it took weeks before he actually could put names with faces and really get to know everybody, and sees how, wow, this is a real accelerator when I can just kind of read past conversations the team has had. Okay, so now remember that original space that we were in that was Grace's project when this story first started. It was the Mirage Building Project, and she invited Aiden into that as a new employee who could help out because the team was behind. And so, now Aiden's here trying to join a project midstream. So, he just got to know the team as he jumped on board, but now we've got a project that have had a lot of, decisions and issues and tasks that the team has worked through. So, again, new space, but the same idea. Aiden's getting up to speed quickly, and the first thing he wants to do is go into the people and see who's here. Well, there's 15 people on this project, but what he notices down here is that there's some groups. And he's been added into the K&A engineering group because that is, his company that he's a part of. But here's the Mirage School, which is the client. And there's subcontractors here too. And what we're doing is we've put people into different groups so that when we do permissioning in the future, it's a lot easier to, have privacy around certain conversations so that we can talk about things we don't want the client to see if we are K&A engineering. So if we go back here and look at some of these conversations that are happening, I'm going to jump into the conversation tab to specifically see all of the conversations in this space. And we see that there's some around conversations around topics or a picture or a calendar event or a task. And the idea here is that conversation and communication is at the core of Kona, and we put it into the context of the things that the group is doing to move the project forward. So if I go into one of these, the go, no-go decision for bidding on phase 2, we take a look and I'm Aiden, and I already have a chance to vote on if I agree to proceed with this proposal or not. So it's a way of tracking, who's in or who's for it. I'm going to say go because I'm the new guy and I want to, you know, be a part of this. And we can see that most people are a go, but William Apple is not a go. And we can read the comments in here as to why he's not. Now, again, this is a conversation around something we don't want the client to see. So when I look at who's a part of this, I see my team, but I do not see the client or the subcontractor. Again, that's the privacy permissions that I was talking about earlier. So let's go into another conversation, which is a decision about a city permit. And when we hop into here, we again see the same permissioning, we see past conversation. There have been some files that I can expand upon here and keep in order of when they were uploaded. But let's say that we wanted to add another file here, and what options do we have? Well, you can add a file right from your computer. You can add a link like from SharePoint or an FTP site, Google Doc integration, Dropbox, Box. Our philosophy with Kona is that people come to file sharing situations with their files in different places, and so we want to be the place where the communication happens around the files, regardless of where they originate. And so let's say Aiden, who's new to the company, he's got a lot of good files in a Dropbox account. Well, he can click here, add his file through Dropbox, and away he goes. Very easy to share this with the group and bring his input. And when it comes to sharing Google Docs, there's some real powerful functionality built in that integrates the permissions that you set up in this Kona conversation with the permissions of the Google Docs. So you can really share Google Docs in a much easier way once you have a group defined inside of Kona. So Aiden, after looking at these conversations inside of this space that he was just invited to, and he's meeting his new team and figuring out what's been going on, he starts to reflect a little bit on how things used to be done where he used to work. And there it was predominantly email, and he starts thinking about, wow, the difference between Kona conversations and email. There's really quite a difference, and he talks or thinks about how did this old world feel? Well, disjointed and chaotic, right? Because you have to deal with all the noise that is happening around the communication. Like in this example, there's two lines here and two lines here of important information that's all mixed in with who this is from and when it was sent, and the bloated signature lines that sometimes get in here, and it just becomes hard to read and quickly find the little bits of information. So you can't really skim easily like you can in Kona. The other thing is that folders, like he used to have to sort email all the time into certain folders to keep track of it in terms of a project or a task he was working on. And he kind of recognizes the wasted time that everyone that he's working with is doing the same thing. Everybody organizes their email in their own way because there's not one central place for that communication to live. And then you get into the reply all issues where a big thread will exist and someone will reply all and the next person won't reply all, they'll just reply to a couple, and then you've branched that conversation into two different areas, and you're dealing with managing that, and then what if you get CC'd on something you don't want to be a part of? How do you get off of that? You don't. It's up to you to deal with it. So when we think about email compared to what we're trying to give the experience of in Kona, it's very different. But now kind of jumping back into our story, after Aiden has looked at all these conversations, he also now wants to kind of dial in and focus in on the tasks and see who's responsible for what. And in Kona, it's essentially a virtual whiteboard for all the teams where the permissions come through. You can filter things by tags. You can have these task lists that help you further organize, and we can sort things by the due date or who owns it, and we can clearly see by these pictures where the responsibility lies. So if I go into one of these specific tasks and I look at like this Mirage building contract, here we're again looking at the permissions. This is a task that's private. It could be public where everybody could see it, but it happens to be private. The communications here, who has done their part is here. If there were files, they'd all be aggregated, right here in this spot. So it's really a nice way to organize, bring context to everything that's important around completing this task. And again, Aiden reflecting back on his old world and where he used to work, he thinks about how they used to do things with Excel spreadsheets. And if we go back to that world, here's what he used to look like. Here's what it looked like. He would have, a task list in Excel that was in a file that really was owned by one person, right? It's not managed collectively as the group. And if that person, had it on SharePoint, then it'd have to be checked out in order for one person to update it. And you really never had everybody accessing the information at the same time. And what also happens with this is that you can't set permissions around these rows. So there could be a real important piece of information in here to keep in the context of this bigger effort. But if it's something you didn't want the client to see, you couldn't bring the client into this task list. So there's no row-by-row privacy in Excel. And then think about communication. So if there's discussions going on about task lists that are kept in a spreadsheet, yeah, you can try to paste them in here like we have and copy email and maybe put some comments in that get long, or maybe you try to attach a file or link a file, but it just creates an ugliness about trying to store information, and the rows get really wide. And the reason for that is that spreadsheets were meant to do calculations. They were never intended to be a place to track communication or track progress of tasks. They also weren't meant to be a place to easily filter multiple owners, because when you start filtering multi-owned tasks, it's hard to see who's responsible for what. And Aiden just looks at this and says, wow, that just feels kind of disjointed and not real time compared to what he's starting to see as possible here inside of Kona tasks, and the ability to see who's responsible for what and capture the communication all in the context of what the group is trying to do. So the next place that Aiden's going to look as he tries to get up to speed with this new project team is on the calendar, this shared calendar that the team has. And he wants to look through here and see the past meetings and really figure out what's the group meeting about. And he can go into this phase 3 kickoff. Seems like a logical place to see how they kicked off this phase that he's now working on. And he can see that Grace here put in some notes about the agenda, and then other people talked about it, and ultimately they had the meeting, and then after the meeting there was some notes that were taken and another document was uploaded. So he can see here at a high level in the notes section the agenda, what was said. He can here to see the files that have been uploaded, and of course obviously see the people who's here. But the point is that all the context of everything about this meeting has been wrapped into one event, and then it's stored and saved right on the calendar where everybody can refer to it later. And again, reflecting on his previous employer, meetings didn't happen that way. And in fact, what would usually happen is he gets some Outlook invite like this one, and then people from there would say, well, what should we talk about? What's our agenda? And they'd pass emails around trying to build that agenda, and then a separate email would be sent out in a different Word document or something with the actual agenda that people would receive. But then they'd show up at the meeting and people wouldn't be able to find the agenda because it was buried in their inbox, and so they'd have to waste time rehashing what they're going to talk about. And then hopefully after the meeting someone would organize notes, decisions, and issues, but instead of putting them in one central place for the group, they would just send them out in an email. And then it's up to everybody to receive that email in each of their own inboxes and figure out, okay, well, is this something I need to do or not? And then if it is something I need to do, I'll keep it in my own separate task list over here. And the reality is we don't know who's doing what. And maybe there's some things that involve SharePoint and accessing large files, or we want to get some external person to the company involved in a file sharing situation. But we can't do that easily because they can't get through the firewall, and it's taking IT too long to get them access, and then they have to configure it. So that doesn't work very well, and we're all left kind of feeling, are you doing your task? Did you get my email that said what you were supposed to do? And the result is we really don't know. And so what do? We have more status meetings. And Aiden was always frustrated by the wasted time in status meetings. And of course, some meetings are important. It's always good to meet. but it's when you're just rehashing past decisions or talking about the same thing you talked about last week, or the right person didn't come to the meeting, whatever it is, in his previous world, he was just wasting too much time. And as he's starting to explore Kona, he's starting to understand how, keeping meetings in the context, keeping information about meetings in the context could really be something that's an improvement over what he previously experienced. All right, so I want to pause the story here just a little bit and kind of review where we've been. So far, most of what I've showed you is collaboration spaces for internal and external teams, whether it be an ongoing group like Grace's direct reports or a project team like the Mirage building space. But another aspect of Kona we haven't talked about yet, and we're going to jump to now, is the private social network for your company. And then we'll touch on personal productivity in a second. But when we're talking about private social networks, what we really mean is a place for the whole company to be, and not just in a project space, but in Aiden's world here, it's a space they've called the hub. And this is a place where all employees are, and it's a place for the communication across the company to be shared. So instead of blasting out emails or having a static intranet site, this is a place where there's active communication going on. So if I go right to the conversation tab, we start to see some of these topics, and I might go into the benefit conversation list, and here we see something being talked about the 401k plan. Here's a poll from HR wanting to know what do I like or don't like about the healthcare coverage or other benefits. And Aiden, again, new to the company, it would probably make sense for him to come into the newsletters and read past newsletters. So if he goes into the August newsletter and opens up the notes page, what his company does is they put basically the newsletter right here on the screen, and he's able to widen this out, make it more like a newspaper, whatever he wants, and read more, and then the company, people in the company, employees, are communicating about what they just read in the newsletter. So it's a very interactive experience instead of just, hey, sending an email out to everybody. And now just kind of stepping away quickly from Aiden's story and just sharing something personally here about the experience I've had with Kona in the Deltek private social network. I'm going to go right into our live active place we call iTalk at Deltek. And this is our private social network. And I'll just show you a few of these conversations that have happened here recently where, the first day of school was recently, and everybody, someone started a conversation about, hey, show us your kids in their first day of school. So, there's, I think, over 100 different people posted their picture and gave some, thought about, hey, here's what my child looked like on their first day of school. And it helped, bridge the gap of helping people know more about each other. Sometimes people will post a good article about leadership, and you'll see different people have a conversation around that. Or, another example was we recently had a big flood in our Makati office in the Philippines. And, we're half a world away, but yet someone posted pictures of it here, and people, offered, their concern and stay safe. And, different people were able to stay up to date on what was happening with our coworkers on the other side of the world just through, this private social network. So you can use these networks in many different ways. Some can be very specific to, an HR benefits survey. Some can be around, new instructions in the employee handbook. But it's also a place where you can get this sense of connectedness amongst people. And really, we know that that's going to help bring your company together and ultimately just drive a better environment in the workplace. And that's one of the aspects of what a private social network is really trying to do for you. All right, so now we're back in Aiden's world, and let's fast forward to the end of his first week. And he's meeting with Grace. She's checking in, seeing how everything's going. And she hits him up with, I want you to lead a new project we're going to start. And she senses a little uneasiness in Aiden because, it's still first week. He's still trying to figure things out. And she points him towards the space template gallery again, which, if you remember, we were here at the very beginning when we picked out that onboarding template. So again, Grace's company has all these different templates on how to do repeatable projects and repeatable processes. And she points him to this new project kickoff template, which is going to bring in the 10 tasks that really make up the methodology of how his company does the kind of project she wants him to do. And inside there are files embedded within each task and some comments in the notes on how to do special things. And there's people there too to help him out. He can invite the team in, and everybody can start from a common place and understand what they need to do right from the beginning. No one has to interpret some document or plan and then create a plan. It's all there, and these templates are a real accelerator. So he's feeling good about that and thinks, yeah, okay, I can take that on. But then Grace also wants to point out what the My Kona view of Kona is all about. So here we are in as Aiden Smith. We are not in a specific project team space. This is Aiden's place, where all the information across all his spaces is coming into one view just for Aiden. So it's all the conversations that he's a part of, all the tasks that he's a part of. Not all the tasks that are in all the spaces, but just the stuff for him. And it really puts him in control, because Aiden can actually leave a space. He can remove himself. He can hide a space. Or if there's one conversation that's just a little too noisy, he doesn't want to get notified anymore, he can mute that conversation. Aiden is in control of what information comes in him. And think about that compared to email, where in email, you're not in control. Information comes at you, you have to deal with it. If you don't deal with it, it builds up, and all of a sudden you've got this mess that you start missing important things. Well, anything that's important to Aiden in the groups he wants to be a part of have been elevated to this place called Kona, and he is in charge. So from a communication standpoint, it's huge, but also from tasks. So as he gets included on tasks, he can move these around. This becomes his personal task list productivity that he manages himself. Same thing for a calendar. Here we're bringing in different events from different spaces and showing him one view, so he can have the power of one aggregated view across everything he's doing. And he, of course, can share this calendar in other places if he wants to a smartphone, to Outlook, whatever he needs to do. So if we think again back to the beginning here about what we're trying to do with Kona, and I'll restate it here again. We want to really provide 3 different types of application in one experience for the user. It's these collaboration spaces for internal and external teams. It's a private social network trying to connect all the employees in the company. And it's personal productivity. It's helping individuals be productive at their jobs. Well, thanks for taking the time to learn a little more about Kona. Please check us out at Kona.com, or ask the person for more information that gave you this link, or you can reach out to me directly at jeffeckerly@deltec.com. Thanks again.